Hey folks, Valentin the Mad here, and today I have a new dev interview. This one is with Marcus, also known as Sergeant Mark IV, the developer of the Brutal Doom mod, who is now making a game of his own, called Brutal Fate. We discussed Brutal Doom, how it gets started, but mostly Brutal Fate, what the game will be, some features that got my attention, and of course, the gore. And he mentioned a few points about my review of Brutal Doom as well. As always, timestamps by themes and questions are in the description. Now, without further ado, here it is. So hi, welcome to the channel. Let's begin with your introduction.
Hello, my name is Marcos, also known as Sergeant Mark IV. I have been working on Doom mods for nearly, actually over a decade now. I'm the creator of mods such as Brutal Doom and Viet Doom. And now I'm developing my own indie game, Brutal Fate.
Yeah, awesome, so we gotta talk about Brutal Doom. It's a massive mod, big overhaul of the game, 21 major version releases, and... So, how long have you been working on Brutal Doom specifically?
Well, I started working Brutal Doom around 2010, yes, it was in 2010, and I actually had made one mod before it called Armagedoom, which was like a custom campaign with custom monsters, but it didn't work very well. I released like 7 maps of it, but didn't work. And then I started with a simpler mod. I wanted to make a mod to really learn about my, develop my skills in general, in programming, in making sprites and doing art. Then I started with a simple gameplay mod, which at that time it was a popular thing to make mods that did not include new maps, just gameplay mods. There are mods like Polished Skull, Nash Gore, Beautiful Doom, and stuff like that. So everyone was making these mods that are like their improved versions of Doom. So I decided to start mine too as a way to practice things.
And that's how you began with Brutal Doom, yeah?
Yes. The first thing I tried to make was a headshot system. I wanted to add like location damage to the Doom engine because until then that was not. I think there was never made before. There was like a Counter-Strike weapons mod that did it, but was not reliable. It never worked. So I tried to make a solid system that would always register headshots, and that was basically the first feature of Brutal Doom. And from there, we started working up on it and adding more stuff until it became what it is today.
Yeah, and it really is an awesome mod, and I personally love it. I played it a lot, and it's fun stuff. Very much so.
Thanks. And, just as I kept going and my skills becoming more advanced, just kept adding things, and I believe in the end it ended up a bit bloated when was the moment I realized that was going overboard and adding too much stuff. And since the engine, the GZDoom engine, was now licensed as GPL, it can no longer contains commercial code and can be used to develop the commercial game, I decided that was time to stop bloating Brutal Doom and move my ideas into its own franchise.
Alright, so moving on to Brutal Fate, so first of all let's begin with what is Brutal Fate and what is it about?
Well, Brutal Fate aims to be like, it plans to, how can I say, I'm trying to make a game that looks and feels like the classic games like Doom, Duke Nukem, and Blood, but I'm not trying to copy them. I want to make something original that instead of like, that there has been like this new wave of revival shooters, and what they mostly do, their philosophy is to just throw away most of the new concepts the new games have developed and go back to the basics. But I believe that there are just too many games like this right now, and I thought it would be a bad idea to make brutal like this removing Brutal Doom out of Doom and turning it into just a Doom clone. So I'm making a mix of both the classic stuff, like it has the basic idea of a 90s shooter. The graphics are true 5D, and you move fast. The levels are non-linear. You have to do stuff like find keys, you have secrets to find, you beat the level, and then you have your score screen. There's all the basic stuff, but there are more advanced things, more modern gameplay features, such as you have more advanced like inventory system, like because you can carry when you get medikits and your health is full, you can carry them to use later. You can you have to reload your weapons. Uh, there's some basic upgrade system to the character and stuff like this. It takes like what was the best things in the 90s shooters and adds some of the stuff that the new games adds and makes it like a more unique game. Like it doesn't try to copy the formula of these games, but be a different game.
Alright, then let's begin with the levels and the setting. Let's talk about the setting, the theme, the locations, and your inspirations for it.
Well, the level design will be quite similar to what I did for Extermination Day, my other Doom mod. It it mixes the abstract kind of the feeling of these classic shooters, but adds a bit more context. It's more, I would say, it looks more like Duke Nukem and Bloodhatter than Doom. The levels are kind of abstract, but they have this realistic feeling to them. Like they look like places that people could be living and working on. And I also take a lot of inspiration from Duke Nukem because I love the way the levels are non-linear and you have several routes. You can enter the same room from different angles. You can play the same level several times, each time playing a different way, using different strategies. I like this a lot. About the themes, the game is it's sci-fi with some hard sci-fi elements and military sci-fi elements. It takes place in the future, in the 23rd century. It takes place in the moon of Callisto, one of the moons of Jupiter. If I was going to talk about the entire plot of the game, it would be a bit long, but I'm going to just shorten things a bit. When the space colonization, before there was the World War III and World War IV on Earth, and by the end of World War IV, half of the population on Earth died. So the nations decide like to make this like the super United Nations called the Global Order Alliance, or the GOA for short, where they made this super military that would prevent future wars by imposing like some military jurisdiction around the world. And when space colonization started, the corporations started colonizing other worlds. They broke their contract they had with Earth, and instead of using the colonies to help Earth to rebuild itself, they all declared independence, and they started wars between the colonies and Earth, and GOA was Earth's forces on these wars. And so there's always this conflict between the corporations that owns the planets and Earth and the GOA. So when they terraform a planet to make it have the semi-gravity of Earth, they dig a hole on it to the core of the planet, and they make an artificial black hole on it that creates gravity, a gravity field that makes the planet has the semi-gravity of Earth and become habitable and support regular normal life.
And that's when things went wrong?
Yes, because at first, like when they colonized Mars first, they knew that with time the black hole causes anomalies around it, but very insignificant anomalies. But for the black hole for Callisto, it had to be a much stronger black hole, and it created way more anomalies. And with time, they noticed these anomalies started showing up in the surface of the planet. People would experience weird things, like inside a building, things like the gravity pulls you to the walls, or people would see strange things like the like a shimmering effect in the air distorts in the light around it and stuff like that. And One of these anomalies end up being a wormhole to another dimension, which is a dimension similar to ours, and they discovered that not only there was this alternative dimension, but an infinite number of other dimensions, and the black holes have broke the wall that separates these dimensions and made their dimension vulnerable to beings of other dimensions coming into ours. So a few months before the creatures invaded Callisto, there was like lots of riots and things going wrong on the colony. It was the colony of Callisto, which is owned by the corporations and had about 1 million people living there. And people are starting to riot in there. And at some point, the colony went dark and communication ceased. And the GOA suspected that was what had happened there was a similar scenario that happened on Mars a few years ago, when the local government decided to issue a lockdown and shut communications with everyone because the population were rebelling. So they saw this as an opportunity to invade, to get the funding to make a mission to invade Callisto and dominate it, set it as a government, that a puppet government that would be willing to give their resources to Earth. So they sent a strike force to dominate the planet. But when they got there were no people there. They were just a legion of demons from another dimension.
So the player will be playing is one of those government guys, right?
Yes, you're a GOA Marine.
Okay. And now a few things I was curious about the gameplay. So you mentioned you are planning basically like big, sort of open levels, right? That are not linear.
Yeah, not exactly open levels. It would be like much more like build engine levels. They are still corridor based. They are usually constricted, but you have several ways to reach your objective. There's not just one path. For example, to enter a building, you can like find a back door, or you can find a ventilation grate and enter through it. There's always more options to. You are not forced through a linear path, but still not open world like. It's still very corridor like.
Alright. Yeah, which kinda led me to a question ahead. So, with those levels, so now you're playing story mode, and now you're playing co-op, right?
Well, there's this. There's the story mode, which you play the base campaign. Then there are the bonus modes, which like survival, like some kind of horde mode where you have to defend this small area and survive against waves. There's like this survival mode where you are in a very open city map and enemies keep spawning infinitely and you must survive as long as you can. There's like lots of different game modes. One of the game modes I'm planning for later, for when you release the final game, is when you beat the game, you can play you can unlock modes which, instead of playing as the Earth's Marines, you play as the government, as the corporate troops, like how they were like what happened before the Marines arrived, like surviving the colony or against the original invasion, or even a monster mode where you play as the demons and killing the colonists. All of these modes are planned, and the game will still running on the Untitled engine, with planning to be supported by the Zendronon engine as well, so people can play both the story mode and those extra modes online. And Zendronon supports up to 64 players online. I cannot offer the multiplayer part, the main multiplayer part of it, as a main part of the game, because the Zendronon engine can't be bundled with the game commercially. But you can just download it. It counts as a multiplayer mod, I guess. You can the only built-in multiplayer system is the one that comes in Armagedoom, but it's only peer-to-peer. It does not support severed client network. So it's only really reliable if you're playing in a local area network game. But it's there. And it's you can play the entire game alone or with friends.
Alright, I hear that. Would there be an option for PvP? Let's say one playing as the monster, someone's playing as the marine?
Yes, I can. I have plans for this low priority. That's going to depend of what's the demand of the public. For the first version, I'm just going to include a basic deathmatch mode of Marines versus Marines, and you because I believe without the added gameplay systems like the dash, the combat rolls, and the somersaults, there, I believe it would be fun to make some that deathmatch with this. If things works and I see people playing, like if there's like enough people demanding more intricate multiplayer modes, I can add multiplayers of modes, competitive multiplayer modes of players, Marines versus monsters, or more objective-based modes like Marines versus mercenaries and stuff like that.
Alright, that sounds fun and we'll see how it goes. And the specific things I'm curious about in the single player portion of the game are stuff I saw on the Steam page about configurability, enemy count, damage and such. Can you talk more about that?
Yes. So instead of having difficulty settings like in Doom or Duke Nukem, like you have ultra violence, nightmare, stuff like that, there's no difficult settings in Bird of Fate. Instead, you can change the way you can adjust each kind of stuff, each gameplay feature separately, so you can change your experience in the game. For example, you can have less enemies or extra enemies, or you can set to Legends mode where portals will keep opening in the level and pouring more enemies all the time in the game. And then you can change the amount of ammo if you want more scarce ammo, or you can set in the maximum setting where any pickup will basically replenish all your ammo. You can change a bit like how much damage enemies deals to you. You can do a bit less, a bit more, or make it basically insta kill you. All those settings you can change then when the game starts, or if you notice I'm running too much of the ammo or it's getting too hard, you can change on the menu at any time, with the exception of monster count, because the level needs to be reloaded to add or remove the monsters. This is the only option that can't be changed in game. And I believe like this solves the problems with people being too, because there's a problem like I see many custom Doom levels that people try to play by the first time ultra violence Doom, and they complain to the designer that it's too hard. I've seen many boomer shooters like especially in Viscera Fest, people playing the demo of Viscera Fest complain the maximum difficulty is too difficulty, and the devs always trying to be nice and not tell these people to go where they fucking deserve to be. And like instead of debating with these people, and just not add difficulty modes that I'll let people do exactly what they want to change in the game. And this comes with the plus of a feature that you can play. It adds replayability to the game by changing the settings to certain configurations. You can completely change the tone of the game. For example, you can set the enemies to the maximum and the ammo to the maximum, and set the enemy damage to the minimum. So you're not making like the game easier or harder, you're just changing the way you must play. So by doing this, you turn the game basically into serious sand. Like there are thousands of enemies coming, and you have like this arsenal that never runs out of ammo. Or you can make fewer enemies, make them have enhanced reflexes, and make them deal the maximum damage, and set the ammo to the minimum. So you basically turn the game into a survival horror, where you must need to take advantage of the level to avoid fights and improvise weapons, because there are like many things in the game like that might slow down the gameplay but give an advantage. For example, going to a bar, picking up like a bottle of liquor and crafting a Molotov with it, or using weapons like a fire axe and improvising stuff. And you might be need to play the game slower and with more emphasis on strategy. It adds a lot of replayability.
Okay, that sounds awesome. One thing perhaps I would suggest is adding a few like pre-made settings for people. So, like basically something like Serious M
That
mode,
will be
something
a
like
bit
a
more
survival
complicated
mode.
because of how the engine works. I would need to, um, uh, for example, the menu settings are hard coded into the GZDoo engine. If I want to keep the base compatibility with the game engine and the updated versions of GZDoo and Zendronum, I might not be able to add these things. I'll see what I can do, but this is not something I can promise.
Alright, not a problem. And the other feature that kind of caught my eye in the Steam page is the AI companions thing. So if you can talk more about that?
Yes, like the companions will be like originally I had the idea of making them more vital to the gameplay, to the story, but I noticed that they were causing trouble with the gameplay because it's very difficult to balance them. They either become too overpowered or they they're just useless and they just get killed by the enemies when they're ambushed. So, well, what I'm going to do is, of course, I'll do more functionality to than they had in Doom. You'll be able to issue orders to them through the radio. Like there is going to be a button that you press and you bring up an order menu where you can change their formation. Like if you want them to prioritize following you, like if you're running away from a large horde and you must make them follow you, they will just fire one burst at them and then they will prioritize running to you. So they keep moving and like usually just turning backwards to shoot once and then go back falling to you. Or you can make them have a more offensive mode, which they will, when they see enemies, they will advance, spread out, and try to advance into the enemy positions. Just retreat when the enemies are getting too close. You can simultaneously order them all to stop at once, or make them all follow you at once. Uh, they also have like more unique personalities, like they will have their own names. They will have have a preset list of names, and each one of them will have their own names and different voice, hopefully too. There will be, for example, like male Marines and female Marines. There's going to be different classes, like there will be uh, uh, guys with rifles, guys with machine guns, and Marines with explosive weapons. There will also be androids. There will be officers and a lot of variety of companions you can have. Originally, I was thinking about giving them a bigger role in the story, but I believe I still might do this, but not as much as I wanted to do, because it would like drag too much on the gameplay, because they still can die very easily. Like they are competent in fighting, but if a huge group of monsters surround you, they're likely to die. And I didn't want to nerf the gameplay just so you could accommodate them, so they won't take a big role on the plot. In the original idea, they would like all have several dialogue lines, like the main plot Marines, and they would talk different things and talk between each other as the levels progress. But to do this, you would need to sacrifice a lot of gameplay, or you would be more like babysitting than having them aid you. I want them to be cool companions that can aid you in battle. I don't want them to become a burden to the player, so the player can get the good end.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. So you basically have AI companions that have some personality, but they're not like in Brothers in Arms, where they're like key characters in the story. I think that's the best approach.
Yeah, like sometimes they show up in the story. They have their part in the story. Their main dialogue line. I might carry some extra dialogues if they survive long enough, but I'm not going to like put a huge focus. I don't want to make the player feel bad if they die. Like just I want I want them to be a benefit to the gameplay, not to become a burden.
Yep, I agree, sounds awesome. Now let's move on to the fun stuff, the gore. So let's begin and go with it category by category. Let's begin with the body damage.
Well, the body damage in Brutal Fate will be a bit improved over Brutal Doom because there are advancements in how things can be calculated in the engine. Before, the only way to make different body parts damage in the Doom engine was to create fake hitbox around the main square hitbox of the monster, and keep moving or respawning this hitbox as the creature moved. This caused a huge slowdown in the engine if you had like maps with more than 100 monsters, and so it was used only to a certain level. For example, small enemies only have like 3 hitbox: the main body hitbox, the head hitbox, and 1 hitbox that was meant to be the legs. Now, since Season Drone updated to 3.0, we can use instead of making custom hitbox, you can just use the original square box of the regular monster, and instead of creating new hitbox for each body part, you can detect which part of this hitbox is being hit by 2 things. You can check the vertical position of it by when the blood puff is spawned. You can check if it's at for example, at the waistline or at the headline, and deal damage proportionate to this. And only spawn actual hitbox when the monsters die or like get staggered by damage to cut off their limbs. For example, you shoot an enemy with a shotgun in the right arm, you're gonna hit the hit buffs are gonna hit the side of the hitbox where the arm is supposed to be. On its death animation, it's gonna spawn new hitbox around its body, and the hitbox was spawned at the position of the right arm will be able to detect these blood puffs that were spawned at that position close to it, and the engine will tell the monster that he was hit in the arm, so it's gonna take the arm off instead. With this method, on some tests I've posted on Twitter, like you can have 1,000, 2,000 monsters in the game without lagging. This is like a 1,000% improvement, 100%, like 500% improvement over Brutal Doom's code in terms of performance, and now it's possible to make more. Yeah. So as I was saying, and not only there's the performance gain, there's also the visible gains on the accuracy of what's happening, because before in Brutal Doom you only had 1 hitbox for the legs, and you shoot the legs, it would randomize which animation it would play, like removing the left to the right leg. Now in Brutal Fate, you shoot the right leg, you cut off the right leg, you shoot the left leg, you cut off the left leg. It's not randomized anymore, so it's both an improvement. Sometimes the system is a bit inaccurate, it's impossible, because in Doom all hitboxes are big squares, and it doesn't even turns around when the enemies are turning, so there's not much that can be done, but still it's a big improvement to the older system, and also a good performance improvement.
So characters will be able to survive limb mutilation and other mutilation, yeah?
Yes, it's also going to affect their behavior, because this is the best thing about making your own game and not trying to edit somebody else's assets. You have full control of everything, so I can make any enemy have any animation I want. You can chop off an arm of an enemy and make his walk cycle completely different. It's not going to take more work because you don't have to redraw animations, and I can to bigger and more massive enemies, they can add multiple points of dismemberment, like make an enemy lose both of his arms, or for example, for hitting him in the chest and make open off his stomach and make he walk with his limbs hanging. There's still, of course, some limitations. I can't do stuff like you see in 3D games where you just shoot enemies anywhere and blood gets marked on all wounds because it's still a sprite-based game. You need the entire sprite set for each level of damage, so it's smarter to save memory and work just to add to more drastic stuff like removing limbs and stuff like that. But this is the best part about it. Like you can go wild because you have full control for everything.
That sounds really cool. And let's go to what was in Brutal Doom the biggest aspect, the blood spilling, and it is, I think in a 3D environment, Brutal Doom is possibly one of the most detailed games in that aspect. So how are you going to go about things in Brutal Fate?
Well, here's another thing that, like I was saying, the best thing of working on your stuff instead of other people's stuff is the freedom. In Brutal Doom, I was limited by the art style of the game. Brutal Doom has this pixelated graphic style, so adding detailed decals was always a difficulty. I always had to make them very pixelated, very low resolution, so they could fit. In the early versions of Brutal Doom, I used high definition textures and I think it looked adorable. Like it doesn't match their style, but in Brutal Fate, everything has 3 times the resolution of Doom, so this is no longer a problem. I can add much more detailed blood splats, which allows me to add like an infinity of variations. For example, when you are like shooting an enemy and the blood decals that are spawned behind him from the impact of the bullet piercing him, you can add a more realistic sprayed out aspect. When on jibs that explodes, you can add some more like some bigger and more blood decals, which like moving like blood that was hit the surface like in large quantities and high movement. You have like now the resolution to pull this, or for example, when you shoot an enemy and he starts crawling on the ground,
what you mean is specific
you can
patterns
add.
Yes. So I'm saying, what you mean is specific patterns for different scenarios, right?
Yes, you can. You can have, for example, when an enemy is on the ground and he's crawling away, you can add a pattern for blood that was bleeding through the floor, and it becomes much easier to do these things because you don't have to worry about fitting the pixelated art style of Doom. So you can add more variations based on the feedback of what caused these blood spatters.
Alright, sounds awesome. And where can people find the game and follow the game's progress?
There's the Twitter where I usually post the work in progress of my stuff, and whenever I'm adding, like making new sprites, new weapons, I post my progress there. I have the Steam page where people can wishlist it. I'm gonna check with GOG and see, because the game will need to be launched in early access with just the first episode. I'm gonna check with GOG if that's allowed on their store or if I need to wait until the game is finished so I can put the game there. But I also plan to release it there. Also, my YouTube channel where I make my developer diaries, explaining more in depth the stuff I'm doing. There's also the Discord channel, which I reunite with people to talk and discuss the ideas I'm having and check what they think. I'm gonna give you the links so you can post them on the video.
Alright, awesome. So thanks for coming.
Anytime, man. I love your channel, and I took a lot of advice from the video you did about Brutal Doom. Just some things like I need to clarify is there's some things about decals that they're a bit heavy on the machine. If I make like every piece of jib create decals, they're a bit heavy on the engine. But I could add this to Brutal Doom, but I'm going to add Brutal Fate like an optional feature like you can change in options to make tiny blood decals by those things, which are warning that they will affect the performance more than regular blood decals. And oh, there was a question you forgot to ask about the rotating bodies.
True.
Uh,
Yeah, so the question was, let's say I just kill the monster and I wanna stand on top of him and look at his body. Would there be a sprite of looking at him from above?
yeah, this is the problem with the art style of the game, because well, the concept of 2.5D game is that the creatures, the living entities of the world, the creatures, the weapons, the things you interact with, they are not 3D, they're 2D. And that's why it's called true 5D, because you put 2D things in a 3D world. And when you give rotations to something, you can't make the thing actually rotate. It must look like the thing is animated, and when you rotate it, it's, for example, when you look a monster turning around, actually the monster is not turning around, you're seeing animation of it. When you add rotations to a thing that doesn't move, such as a dead body, you are adding you are communicating to the viewer that that thing's moving. So I experimented in early versions of the game to add rotations to the dead bodies, and they looked absolutely terrible. You would like enter a room with lots of dead bodies, and these bodies would be flickering because they're rotating
I
as
see
the
what you mean.
camera.
I see what you mean. Yeah, that makes sense.
And it looks really, really, really ugly. It's not like I immediately give back on the idea, because when the but what I'm doing to minimize this problem is to add a focus on the wounds. For example, whenever you kill an enemy, you shoot off its arm, it always falls forward. So the position where you shoot off the arm, you can get that close and look at the severed arm. The wound is always on the focus on the dead sprite, and I believe this might reduce this problem.
Alright, yeah, sounds great, and thanks for clarifying it.
So, well, guess that's it then.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Anytime, and thank you for the interview. I always love talking about the game, and well, you hope you can continue your work on your channel despite the monetization.
Thanks, man.